Thanks so much for having us. We're really happy to be here and presenting with Helen today. As soon as Marco and I arrived today, we weren't in attendance yesterday, and we were talking to people about how the conference went. And one of the women was telling us, it was amazing, it was so fabulous. There was an astronaut here. And as she was talking, I was going like this, like sinking down. And she said, no, don't worry, they didn't go to the moon. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna not take you to the moon today for sure, but we hope you'll learn a little bit about what it means to think like a designer, both from a practical perspective from Helen's in the private sector, as well as ours in doing some municipal work inside the region of Peel. So we wanted to actually start a little bit with, try to make this point to you with this question. How many designers does it take to change a light bulb? I don't know if anyone's heard this one before. But a designer would probably answer that question by saying, does it have to be a light bulb? So part of the point that we want to try to underscore and make with this entryway into what it means to think like a designer today is to express that from our perspective, design is really about asking better questions oftentimes and leading to different opportunity spaces by doing so. This is an example of the Philippines in an impoverished area that designers tackled the challenge of bringing light to that community. And through the use of recyclable bottles and solution and solar power, they were able to cost effectively bring light to this entire community, where you see a different opportunity space presented before you, rather than if the question would have been, how do we recreate a light bulb? So today we want to share with you sort of the art of being purpose-driven in what we're pursuing as design and finding the right problems to solve.
So how do designers do that? So I'll take you through some of the mindsets and tool sets that designers use. So what we do want to share with you is the idea of mindsets and tool sets. Really that design can make a purposeful change happen, which is the mindset behind it. The mindset being that it's the operating system that designers work from. It's their belief system and understanding that change is possible, meaningful, purposeful change is possible. And it's done through an intentional process. So the tools and techniques that they apply, and we'll go through some of those, but really in the end to get to relevant solutions that create impact, positive impact for people, and that it's people driven. So some of the things from the mindset perspective that we want to share with you is the fact that it is human-centered, it is people-driven. So you have to develop a sense of empathy and understand where people are in a problem and how that problem is affecting the actual people involved, and turn it from their perspective and not from an inside-out corporate perspective. Very much an iterative process, which is to move things through. So we talk about making mistakes and learning from it and building. So it's course correcting and learning. It's systemic. So it recognizes when we're talking about complex problems and solving problems from a municipal perspective or a public sector perspective, the issues that we deal with are complex. And so we got to understand that the issues that we're intervening in are part of a larger system. And so that when you're designing for one piece of it, you recognize it does touch other parts of a larger system. There's a bias toward action, so design is really about doing. So we talk about design thinking, but there really should also be balancing with design doing. It's about putting things into action and learning from it. You do that by failing fast, failing cheap, failing early and often. I know you went through some of this yesterday, but it's really important as part of the mindset toward a designer, how design operates. It's participatory. So the more people you bring to the room, the better the conversation. And that means you can bring people in from a learning perspective and understand the problem from their perspective. You can bring them right through to implementation in co-design solutions with members of the community. And it's multidisciplinary. The more, again, the fact that you're bringing people in the room, but also that you're bringing multiple problems, you have multiple solutions to an actual problem. So as Derek mentioned in the beginning, it's not about creating silos within, let's say, public works or within one department. It's understanding that the issues are all interconnected, like we said earlier, systemic, and finding those players that can come in and solve the problem with you. So from a tools perspective, we use things called ethnography, which is really the study of culture and understanding people, as we said, from their perspective. Visualization is key. I know we've all been in rooms where we've had conversations and someone has maybe taken minutes and then we walk away and we forget what that was all about. But next time you're in a meeting, especially if it's a particularly difficult meeting and you're not getting concepts across to people, try visualizing. And that's like simple things, line drawings. You don't need to be an artist. But to visualize your thoughts and actually create spatial differences between what you're saying, you would see how much of a difference it actually makes in getting to better understanding. So prototyping and making, again, it goes with the idea of being iterative and biased toward action, the mindset, which is really making things and putting it out there in public. If you can get things out there, people have something tangible to actually talk to and touch and feel and contribute to. Synthesis, this is key. Synthesis and reframing go hand in hand. And synthesis is really just the opposite of what we normally do, which is what we've been taught in school, which is analysis. And analysis is the breaking down of information. We take something very complex and we break it down into pieces and we solve it into pieces, put it all back together, and assume that all those pieces go back together. And quite often they don't. And design takes a different approach that says they go out there and as designers, we learn what we don't know. And we take all that information and we try to bring it together in new and different ways to help us reframe the problems that we currently see. And reframing is key because it allows us to step outside what we currently understand to be a problem with the new information that we've built to see it from a completely different light, just like the light bulb example that Amy shared with you.
I've known these two for a really long time now, and I don't think they'll mind. I have to stand while I talk. Do you mind? It's the only way that my brain is not connected to me when I'm sitting. So great introduction. We've been working on design thinking approaches in all kinds of different venues for a really long time. Always at the beginning of that, I like to sort of take a contextual point of view. So, like, why is this stuff important? Why is thinking like a designer going to have any kind of impact going forward? So the first thing I think that's important to think about is, where are we going? And why is that challenging? So if you think about, Susan and Ken mentioned some of the sort of burning challenges that face municipalities and all public sector individuals at this point in time. So here's some things to think about. We are all facing multiple expectations from citizens, from people who are funding, from business. They want better solutions to be delivered to them more quickly than ever before, right? So we want, in the transportation example, less congestion, delivered cheaply, and delivered fast, for example. And is that always possible? Well, it's really difficult in a funding situation where money is scarce, right? And so that faces all of you in your municipal circumstances. We know that technology is coming at us in a rapid way and totally transforming our workplaces, the way that we do business, and even the way that we think and interact and have relationships with one another. And so that's a sort of foundational challenge that all of us have to face. We have huge ambitions, and I would say that for those of you that work in the public sector, your ambitions in many ways are even bigger than in the private sector because we have social ambitions as well as ambitions around prosperity. So we want to deliver inclusive growth. We don't want to just deliver growth. We want to make sure that we have health and wellness and prosperity for all. And we're doing all of that in the middle of a rapidly changing world and in many ways a challenging world. So you might think that this picture is after the hurricane, but it's not. This is in Quebec. And this year in Windsor, there was major flooding. Across the country, there have been all kinds of climate challenges that are impinging on the amount of money that you have and the way that you deliver services, just as an example. And there's lots of other ones. We have immigration challenges. We have all kinds of social challenges as well. So the world is on our doorstep and affecting us. So when we tackle things in government, in the private sector, in the third sector as well, we often use plans. We use 5-year plans. How many of you use a strategic plan? Almost every hand. Okay, so when you're faced with something that is really fundamentally different, disruptively different, as Ken said, is a 5-year plan going to help us? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So what's important in that case is that we have a clear understanding of ourselves. And as designers, the way that we think, we would want to understand our own perspective first so we know where we are biased. Do we have a sense of what's coming? Have we anticipated the future effectively enough? And are we all aligned in our purpose? And so that's a little bit what we want to talk about today as a starting point for the rest of our conversation. The exercise that we're going to do with you is that those characteristics are part of what help us to think like designers. So often, design thinking and design acting is in response to change that's around you. Because if everything was the same, you kind of don't need new solutions, right? So the requirement for new solutions is because you're faced with new and different circumstances. So one of the ways to react and manage change is to manage change is to be reactive to it. And so what does that mean? You have a particular situation that comes up. What could be a situation that might happen in your given municipality? Think of one in your head. You take that situation and you have a reaction to it, an immediate reaction, and from that, you get some kind of result, hopefully a really good result. So in your daily life, that might happen as there's been an accident. You want to respond to that accident immediately to improve the situation, and the result that you get is maybe you save a life. So if somebody had a heart attack, for example, you would want to immediately help them and improve the situation. So that's being reactive. So here's what being reactive feels like. It's like a house on fire, right? So if that house was on fire, what would you want to do? Are you going to stand around and think about the best way to deal with that house? No. You want to either get out of the house or put the fire out immediately. But in government, very often, all your decisions feel like house on fire decisions. How many of you have dealt with a house on fire decision in the last week? At every table, somebody said yes, right? And so that pressure to be reactive to a situation, it's important not to eliminate it, but it's also important for it not to dominate all of your thinking. Okay, here's a different way to think and to manage the change that's coming at you. So most of you, I think, would say you're trying to be strategic. So you have an objective in mind, something that you're trying to accomplish. So your objective might be to improve safety in a particular circumstance. And so you would gather input so that you have a clear understanding of that objective and all the things that are going to be dependent. You would develop a plan and a course of action based on the input and description of the objective, and you would get an output. And so those outputs that you have in municipal life sometimes can feel like this. It can feel like a conveyor belt of solutions that are just going out the door every day. You're feeding people if there's hungry in your municipality. You're making sure that people are educated. You're making sure that social services are being delivered. But those often can feel like conveyor belt solutions. And if something happens and the conveyor belt breaks for some reason, are you equipped to continue solving problems? Probably not. So here's a different way to think, to be adaptive and purpose-driven. And the way that you would begin that is to start with purpose, not an objective, but a purpose. What am I doing here? Why am I doing it? And to do that, you require a much bigger starting point of input, way more kinds of input into describing the purpose. And then on the other side of it, you need not just a plan and a course of action, but you actually require guiding principles that you can go back to when the plan breaks down. And what you get from that is not outputs, but outcomes. And that's really what we all want, right? We want outcomes. We want to change something. Okay, so what's the difference? Let's just talk about it. So a reactive initiative is driven by the right this minute, right now, okay? Rapid response, and you get immediate relief from something. And you know, you can feel that, right? You get an adrenaline rush, and you solve the problem. So it's problematic if you're getting an adrenaline rush and immediate reaction when the complex problems that you're solving, the intertwined complex problems that have long-term consequences, you don't want to be having the adrenaline rush in that circumstance, right? So why is this complicated? It's very hard to replicate exactly each time you're faced with something. It's very hard to scale up those solutions because they're immediate, right? And it's because of that, it's hard to assure that you're going to have a successful outcome at the end of the day. But it works when there's an immediate need and there's no alignment in the group. You can just dive in and do something. So it is good in some circumstances. A strategic objective, by contrast, is driven by what you're trying to achieve, that objective I talked about before. If it's too rigid, what can happen? If something disrupts you, it's no longer valid, it doesn't work anymore, right? It can be hard to spread across your organizations. Have any of you ever built up a strategy and then seen it fail because there's poor uptake in the department down the hall or across the whole of the government? You're laughing because it happens all the time, right? And it's not just you, it's everywhere. People get confused by the difference between what's a strategy, the plan, and what's a tactic, the thing you're going to do, right? It works when you have a totally aligned team. So some of you work in very aligned teams, and when you have manageable pressures. But the truth is that the life in municipal government right now, the pressures are high, right? So you're doing great work under extreme pressures often. So if you think about adaptive and purpose-driven work, instead of being guided by what you're doing, now you would be guided by why you're doing it. You have to have clear understanding of those guiding principles. You need to continuously monitor for what's changing over time, and you have to have a design thinking perspective, as Marco described at the beginning. And it works when change is really rapid, that's right now, and uncertainty is high. So do you feel like you live in highly uncertain times? Nod your head if yes. Yeah, lots of nodding. Okay, so let's compare the endpoints that you get to. So in a reactive one, you get ad hoc solutions, which are totally fine sometimes, but don't work over the long haul. In a strategic perspective, you develop services and protocol and all kinds of stuff, right? Maybe you build a road. And those are also important to understand. But those don't represent fundamental change in behavior. A purpose-driven outcome is when you get a change, a difference is made. And it's based on shared knowledge, improved or different behavior, and some kind of beneficial change. And so those are the differences. In fact, what you need to do is do all three of those, but be driven by purpose. Okay, so how do you be adaptive and purpose-driven? Here's some questions to ask yourself. So you might want to write these down. So at the beginning of the day, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. Who or what am I here for? And that might be, you might say, the citizen. You might be really specific and say the citizen of Guelph. You might be even more specific and say the underprivileged citizen of Guelph. Be really specific. Who or what am I here for? Why do they need me? And how can I help? Those are purpose-defining questions. And once you've done that, alone and together with your teams, you can develop a set of guiding principles that reflect those answers, right? And so using that, it will help you figure out what it will take to fulfill your purpose. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. So if you want to be strategic, and you had as the example new employment systems, right? What would a strategic perspective on new employment systems? The 2 speakers before both talked about needing to attract talent in municipal situations, right? And so if you were being strategic about that, some of the decisions and the directions that you might suggest would be things like this. You might say that you want your employment system to be flexible. That's a strategic decision. You might want it to be competitive, right? You're going to pay people competitively, you're going to place your offices competitively, you're even going to have groovy seating. You want to be fair, and you want to be comprehensive in the way that you structure that. So that's a strategic way to look at that idea of employment systems. If you're going to be adaptive and purpose-driven, you might take a slightly different tone. And what you want, ultimately, is for the principles to be in place even when the strategy fails. So sometimes your strategy fails. You have, any politicians in the room, close your ears, there's new political realm, right? And so the direction might change, but the underlying purpose might remain the same. So here's a different example. A purpose-driven employment system might encourage a flourishing workplace. That's different than saying it's flexible. Being flexible is one way to encourage a flourishing workplace. A different way might be to offer training, or a different way might be to allow somebody to go and work in a different department for a period of time. Those are all different ways to encourage an individual to have a flourishing business life or working life. You might want to generate prosperity as an underlying purpose for your employment system. And that seems like maybe they're not connected, but those kinds of decisions would persist even when your strategy fails. And finally, you might want to enhance sustainability as part of your employment system, the ways that you attract people, the kinds of channels that you use. So this is a guideline for how you make decisions no matter what. So I gave you this before. So when we say guiding principles, really what we're talking about is what problem are we really trying to solve anyway, right? So that's another way to think of it. And so back to what Marco and Amy said at the beginning, finding the right problem in the beginning helps you clarify your purpose and helps you more effectively and more efficiently deliver solutions ultimately that are going to be on target and well received. And so then eventually you're able to make your plan and take action and figure out how to make it happen. So again, we'll just compare flexible versus being able to enhance a flourishing workplace. Very different ways to think about the same problem. Okay, so just lastly, just some key thoughts of what it takes to be in that mindset. You need to be identifying the right problem to solve in the first place. And I know yesterday you did rapid ideation, right? Which is really fun. And can be a really effective way to move to an improved and innovative solution. But if you do all of that work aiming at the wrong problem, then it wasn't work that was useful, right? So the first thing is to find the right problem. Then listen really actively for signals that change is happening. And that's hard, particularly when you're in a closed system. So invite different people into the conversation so that you're having an open conversation and you're aware of the change that's coming. You need to do some sense making. Look at all the information and see where there's patterns and new emerging possibilities. Share understanding of the guiding principles that are foundational to what you're trying to accomplish. Translate those into plans and actions, and express your outcome always as a fulfillment of your purpose. Okay? So in strategic language, you often talk about a vision, a mission, and what I'm talking about is your vision is the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Your mission, which is your how am I going to get there and why am I doing it? And the plans and actions and the guiding principles represent the values that you believe in order to make those things come true. Okay? So at the end of the exercise, we'll leave some time for questions if you have some. But I'm going to hand over to, which of you two? To Amy. to give you an example of this kind of purposeful work in action in the region of Peel.
Everything Helen said, we're trying to touch upon and provide an example from Peel that is a good way to demonstrate the way that our organization is moving to embrace purposeful design. And the one way that we wanted to tell you about this was a bit about our journey, which we're actually calling our journey from moving from working for you to working with you. So many of you may not have known, but in 1974, the regional municipality of Peel was incorporated, and it was sort of rallied around the mantra that working for you was what our organizational sort of mantra was. In 2015, we embarked on our strategic planning process, but with all of the peers who we worked with inside our organization, we knew that we needed to do something quite different. We were well aware that there was a transformation of government underway, and that the expectations of our citizens and a number of trends and increasing complexity of the problems that we're trying to solve really couldn't happen through a strategic approach. It needed to happen through a purposeful approach. And that began with the understanding that if we're going to make change and start with asking the question, why do we exist as a government? We needed to take a longer term focus to the work that we're doing, because we can't make change on 4-year cycles of renewing our strategic plans. These problems will take time, and they will require other people to collaborate with us. And so we needed a plan that could do that and could represent where we wanted to go as a municipality, and also allow for the perspective of our community and our shifting community to be represented in where we were headed at the same time. So the beginning part, we wanted to tie back to what Helen had talked about to show the connection to how we approach this purposefully, that in this strategic plan with a 2035 focus, 20 years is how far we were going to look out. We did use much, much, much more engagement and input. And in our circles, we're referring to that as citizen engagement. And some of you are probably doing that to a great degree too. And it also takes time to do and to do well. The way that we did that and what we learned in that experience of doing that is that it's different, very different actually, between asking someone what they want and actually being engaging. So the art of citizen engagement is something that takes a long time, and it also means that you have to spend time to actually create a way to invite people to the table with you and to explore what their needs are, their current needs and their unmet needs, and to do a good job as design researchers in better understanding and unpacking what they actually are looking for in the future. The way that we did that was to create a platform for that type of engagement to happen, and we called it Peel in 2035, Can You Imagine? And the way that we did this was through the summer of 2015, we used the Peel Art Gallery Museum and Archives to create a stomping ground as a participatory exhibition to invite the public to come in and co-design this exhibit with us, where they were able to get an understanding of what the current state of Peel was, what the demographic issues were, what the key challenges were, but also through a number of different design methods, we're engaged in better understanding what they hoped for and wanted for the future, that they were a future of Peel region. This was just an example. We wanted to express this point of much, much more engagement and sort of where we went with that. Some of these are pictures of what we did. And honestly, to do citizen engagement, it has to be engaging. And so part of that was fun. So at the bottom of the screen, there's actually, and everyone in the pink shirts is part of a flash mob that we did. We wanted to drive attendance down to the beginning of this exhibit where we were looking to gather the input from all of our citizens. And we had a flash mob pop up at the farmer's market. And we had them use the Prince song, 1999, and change that to, so today we're gonna party like it's 2035, and had everyone drive attention down and down to the beginning of the exhibit, where we had members of council and members of our leadership team there really expressing how important it was that we take the time throughout the summer to better understand what the key issues are that are facing our community. We did staff engagements as well, where we built mission control. Helen was talking about mission. So once we better understand what the vision is for our community, and it was a community-defined vision, which was for the first time ever at Peel Region, rather than an organizationally defined vision, we had our mission. So now that we understand where we're going, what are we uniquely skilled at being able to do as our government? And we did a lot of staff engagements to understand that. One of the other methods that was really important that we wanted to share with you today, because you might be able to use this as well. It was a process which it has a peculiar name. It's actually called structured dialogic design, which sounds very academic, but I will tell you that idea around what we did in these engagements, they were held in 2 evenings. The idea behind it is that if you're solving problems with people, you need to bring the people who are part of these situations into the room with you. So we brought community members together, business, citizens, to make sure that we were representing everyone who was a part of that system. And the process is structured in such a way where you're designing things collaboratively. So what we did was take all of the issues that our council had determined were important priorities for our citizens, and we went through a process where people were able to come to a point of agreement on where they thought that the core agreement topics and issues that could be found in that room. Now, some of you may have done techniques like this before, and witnessing it was something I think that was pretty powerful for Marco and I to be able to see what happens when you have purpose driving work that you're doing. What tended to happen is at the beginning, everyone comes with a very clear and defined sense of, this is the issue that is important to me. I will not budge from that issue. I'm maybe there on behalf of a community interest group, and that's what I'm driving home for this today. The way that it happens is that groups are working together and they're asked to look at all of the issues that are presented, but to determine if they were to invest in these issues, what issue would be the most impactful if they were able to pick the highest tier issue. So if we resolve this issue, what other problems that we're here today arguing on the behalf of or advocating on the behalf of might also be ameliorated or supported by that? And dramatically, at the end of the night, we had full agreement from people who left their platforms and positions to say, the issue that we want people to invest in is intergenerational connection and belonging. And if we could do that, many of the issues that we have, from youth unemployment to housing and homelessness, people would say, I think that would help the issue that I feel strongly about if we invested here. So that was an example we wanted to share from that method. And then also inside the art gallery, we had a little room that we built, and we took people to the future through a time machine that we built with a little app where you would walk in and it would make a little noise and it would send you to 2035, where we had people record their hopes, fears, dreams, and vision for the future of Peel in 2035, which became a leading input into our vision. We'll share a little bit with you.
What is your vision? What's your vision? What is your vision? What you dream of? Peel in 2035.
Better traffic conditions.
Better public transit.
Traffic jams. Too many cars and we can't travel anywhere.
Great transportation.
More comprehensive transit system so everyone can get where they're going faster.
Transportation that works.
Few less cars and maybe a better transit system.
Less reliance on cars and a lot less traffic.
Gridlock.
To see all the cultures come together and everybody embrace and enjoy it.
It's more support for the arts.
Cultural events that are accessible to the entire community.
Nordic model of socialism.
Cleaner parks and maybe more park space.
More nature-friendly areas.
Everything will be green.
Eco-friendly.
Trees.
Better future for our environment.
I want more forests.
Clean air, clean food, clean water.
Eco-friendly. Green areas and parks and rivers for all.
Green space. A little less population.
Less child poverty.
End to poverty.
Feeling of safety.
Getting rid of all the big factories.
A lot of housing.
Healthy world and a healthy place to live. No cancer.
Treatments for cancers and other diseases.
Having more universities, schools, and businesses coming into the region and offering business opportunities for many people living here.
More accessibility to downtown. Increase the transportation.
More buildings.
Sustainability.
More outlets for people with mental health issues to go and seek support.
Open-minded people.
Peace, love, happiness, and belonging for everyone.
So that's just a little snippet of some of the things that we gathered. But you saw some of the research that was done in the engagement efforts, and it was really about setting the context and really setting the tone for what the purposeful change was going to be at the region, and giving people the opportunity and the platform within the mindset that was created of the future, and getting people's input. So it was really important that we did that. And we did that through, as Amy said, multiple touch points. So in the end, what we did was we took the idea of purpose, and that is in our world, in the municipal world, we're trying to say is basically the vision of what we're trying to achieve. Doesn't like me, I think. And at the Region of Peel, the purpose of the vision that we're after is a sense of community for life. And it's a beautiful sentiment when you think about it. The Region of Peel recognizes, based on the complexity of the things that we've talked about today, that we're not in this game alone, and that we need to embrace the community and really build a community that can come together for the idea of life, to sustain life, and also from an idea of duration. That is, this is a forever thing. That community and this approach of coming together is key. So it's really at the heart of everything that the Region of Peel is now setting forward to do. So the guiding principles that we put behind this work, and it's a loose framework that we're using to show you how Helen's point is driving at coherence, so that when we say, I've been part of other strategic planning processes where people skip over a vision, they skip over a mission, and they get right down to the nitty-gritty of the work. And then what we find in the end is we do a lot of great stuff, but the idea of coherence is missing. So you're doing strategic work, but to Helen's point, we're not getting at the purposeful work or the outcome-based stuff, because we might be firing in all these different cylinders and we're not getting the collective impact that we could possibly get. So that comes from building that coherence. And that's a mix of vision and mission. And so from the research that we did external environment and trends, a lot of literature reviews and understanding where the future of government's headed. As Amy mentioned, the citizen and community engagement along with staff engagement, which is the internal environment and culture. And of the things that we learned that externally from the research that government is really moving towards innovation, that they're trying to get closer to the people, trying to actually be part of including them in the process. The citizen engagement side was definitely the sense of belonging and connection. People talk about wanting to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And you heard in the video the last person saying that driving this sense of belonging is key. And internally, we really, at Peel, have this desire to actually work across silos. We do want to be more collaborative. And so when we took all that information and we used this idea of synthesis, instead of breaking it all apart, but bringing it together, really at the core of that is this sense of width. And that's really what set up the context for the Region of Peel's mission, which is working with you. And that's really what we're talking about when we're saying how working with you as a mission really does, or guiding principles, does follow the vision of community for life. It embraces the fact that community is key to resolving issues. And the only way you can do that is to stop working for people and really to start working with people. And so we love this quote: often in the name of doing things for people, traditional hierarchical organizations end up doing things to people. And that's really been the driver of the shift behind what the Region of Peel is after, and what this shift from working for to with really is. We've got a little video, another video to share with you, just to give you a sense of what we did during the process.
So based on the time we have today, we wanted to be able to give you a practical tool that you could use. It's not going to be a quick thing that you can do, but we hope that you can always apply the sensibility of it. It's called challenge mapping, and really what it's designed to do is expand your understanding of the problem space that you're working in. So we're going to ask you to build a challenge map, which will allow you to ask some different questions and find some different starting point problems that you might be able to decide are better starting points. The context that we're going to give you is actually, we wanted to share a part of work that a problem that we're actually tackling right now. So as we've designed this new strategic plan, we have some work underway to design for the future of our organization, which is better understanding what the future of work looks like and how to attract and retain top talent. And so we're going to set you up with a bit of a case study as to what we found in our research that we've done inside our organization to date. Everyone will have a card that represents a piece of our findings from our research regarding how to design for and improve our internal culture and our internal workplace to be more open to attracting top talent. And I'll let Marco sort of walk you through the technique of challenge mapping.
On your large piece of paper there, the flip chart paper, there should be a yellow or blue card. That's your initial problem card. So every table will have their own problem card. I'll show you this one as an example. So if the initial problem card here was, how might we improve workplace flexibility? By the way, yes, designers love to state everything as how might we. I know you had a bit of that yesterday, but it's really important that we do state it that way because it becomes, again, a bias toward action. It's not just a conceptual thing. It's about how do we put a verb in there and actually move toward doing something. So how might we improve workplace flexibility? You would then answer that question. So that staff can work wherever they are most productive. That might be a response to that. That response then will have to be reworded or restated again in a how might we. So then that subsequently becomes, how might we enable staff to work where they are most productive? Again, you keep doing that. You're asking yourself why. And the reason why, when we go upward, we ask the questions why. So why do I want to do that? It's because of X. You answer a response. And then how might we that question again. The idea of going wide makes it a little bit more abstract and expands the problem space that you're currently in. So you do that, you can do that 1, 2, 3 different levels. So a response to how might we enable staff to work where they are most productive might be so that staff can balance work and life successfully. That gets reworded into a how might we enable greater work-life balance for our staff. So that's what happens when we stretch the questions going up. So what you end up having are different problems. Now you've got 3 different problem areas, not just the one that you started with, but you've expanded. Additionally, you can also go downward. So pushing up gets us to more abstract and more idealized situations. You could probably eventually end up to eternal bliss and happiness or something, I'm not sure. But if you go the other way, it's a little bit more concrete. So it's the idea of the things that are stopping us from doing what we want to do. So how might we improve workplace flexibility? Again, that's the same initial card. You will then ask the question or answer that question. What's stopping us from doing that is staff don't feel empowered to control their own schedules. So then you turn that into a how might we. How might we provide staff with greater autonomy? So really you're just you're answering a question with either a why, and you would put a sticky going upward, or a what's stopping us, and you would go downward. And really you're just expanding and contracting the problem. So what we would need then is, so you take your initial problem statement that you have, you've got stickies on your table, you can go through the brief, the instructions are in the brief as well, in the manual that's on your desk. But really you would ask the question, why do I want to why do I want a response to the problem statement? Someone would respond that would get translated back to a how might we. That sticky is then put onto the page. And if it's a what's stopping us, it gets put on the page in the same way below the center.
And so the idea for that picture is that instead of everyone working on a project having ideas in their head, you're able to make that visual and sort of map the space of that problem and come to better decisions as to what problem you should start with.
And there's some tips on how to get started as well.
Thanks so much.